are listening to the Innovation Forge, the #1 podcast on adaptive enrollment management, exploring the data, marketing, and strategy that fuels higher education. Here's your host, David Dysart.
It is waiting for fall.
Completion is not competence. That's the line for this episode. A Slate build can be live. It can work. It can even be clever. It can solve the immediate problem. It can impress the room in a demo. And still, the work may not be finished. Because if only one person understands how it works, the institution hasn't actually built capacity, it's built a dependency. That does not mean every user needs to become a Slate architect. It does not mean every counselor needs to understand the deepest parts of configurable joins, liquid, rules, workflows, portals, and integrations. But it does mean that the right people need the right level of understanding for the work they are expected to use, maintain, explain, or govern. The build's not truly done when it launches. It's done when the institution can operate it without guessing, when the owner can explain why it exists, when another person can maintain it, when staff can use it correctly, when documentation exists in a form people can actually use, and when training has moved beyond, watch me click through this once. That's the argument today. Advanced Slate work is incomplete if it cannot be taught. I'm drawing from 5 Slate Summit sessions that approach this from different angles. Brady from Purdue University Undergraduate Admissions presented Hitting the Right Notes, Designing a Scalable User Training Program. Katie from the Parish Group and Tommy from Villanova University Grad Admissions presented This is Not a Side Quest, Gamifying Training Using Interactive Forms. Ben from College of the Holy Cross and Sarah from Gettysburg College presented Durable Change by Design. Risa and Aaron from Harvey Mudd College in Huron presented Written in Slate, Not Stone, Excavating Legacy Decisions and Building for Scale. And Emily from Stanford University Grad Admissions presented In Perfect Harmony, Centering Department Administrators in Decentralized Grad Admissions. These sessions fit together because they all point towards the same reality. Slate knowledge does not transfer by accident. It transfers through structure, practice, documentation, role clarity, and repetition. And the more advanced the build, the more intentional the transfer needs to be. Welcome to the Conference Insights Engine, presented by the Innovation Forge. I'm David Dysart, and this series is about turning Slate material into interpretation and application. This episode's about training, but not in the narrow sense of a training session. I'm not just talking about webinars, help documents, or onboarding slides. I'm talking about knowledge transfer as part of Slate architecture. And the distinction matters. Training is often treated as something that happens after the build. The project's finished, the builder schedules a walkthrough, people attend, maybe the session's recorded, and then everyone goes back to work. It can be useful, but it's not enough for complex systems. If the build changes the daily work, training has to be part of the build itself. If the build introduces new logic, training has to explain the logic. If the build depends on specific data definitions, training has to explain the data. If the build has risks, training has to identify the risks. And if the build needs maintenance, training has to prepare someone to maintain it. Otherwise, the institution gets launch without adoption. That's a common pattern. A tool is built, but staff do not fully use it. Or maybe they use it inconsistently. Or they use it correctly for a few weeks and then drift. Or they trust the output but cannot explain it. Or they stop using it because the person who understood it is no longer close enough to the work. The problem is not usually laziness. It is usually that training did not match the work. That is why Brady's Hitting the Right Notes session is such a useful anchor. A scalable user training program starts with the idea that staff learning needs structure. You cannot rely only on the one-off explanations, hallway help, or heroic troubleshooting. A growing Slate environment needs a training system that can be repeated, adapted, and maintained. The word scalable is important. Scalable training does not mean everyone gets the same training. It means the training model can support different roles without reinventing everything each time. A new admissions counselor does not need the same training path as an operations coordinator. A grad program administrator does not need the same training as a deliver builder. A reader manager does not need the same training as someone maintaining portals. A senior Slate administrator does not need the same training as a new seasonal reviewer. But all of them need some shared orientation to how the institution uses Slate. They need vocabulary, they need context, they need boundaries, and they need to know where documentation lives. They need to know which actions are theirs and which are not. They need to know when to ask for help. That's where role-based training becomes essential. A training program should never only answer, what can Slate do? It should answer, what does this person need to do well, safely, and consistently in Slate? That actually changes the design. Instead of creating one giant training library and hoping people find the relevant parts, the team can build learning paths. One path for the everyday users, one path for functional owners, one path for campaign builders, another path for event managers, a path for reader staff, one path for portal maintainers, one path for advanced administrators. The same documentation can support multiple paths, but the sequence and expectations differ. That's the first principle of the episode. Training should follow responsibility. If someone's responsible for using a process, they need user-level competence. If someone's responsible for maintaining a process, they need maintenance-level competence. If someone's responsible for approving or governing a process, they need to have enough understanding to ask good questions. If someone is responsible for rebuilding the process, they need technical depth. These are all different thresholds. When institutions blur those thresholds, two things tend to happen. Either users are overwhelmed with details they do not need, or maintainers are underprepared for risks they need to understand. Good training avoids both. The session from Katie and Tommy, "This is not a side quest," adds another layer. Training has to be active. That title is doing real work. Training often gets treated as a side quest, a useful add-on after the real build is done. But the session reframes training as something that can be embedded, interactive, and purposeful. The use of forms in gamified practice is useful because it turns the learner from a viewer into a participant. That matters because Slate knowledge is procedural. You do not learn Slate deeply by only hearing someone describe it. You learn by making decisions, testing records, interpreting results, seeing edge cases, and understanding why the system behaves the way it does. Interactive training forms can help because they reveal understanding. They can ask the learner to identify the right action, choose a path, diagnose a record, explain a status, or complete a task. The trainer can see where people are confident and where the logic's not landing. It's much better than assuming silence means comprehension. A good training activity does not have to be elaborate. It just has to make the learner do something meaningful. For example, after training on an application review process, ask the learner to identify which records are ready for review and which are not. After training on event follow-up, ask the learner to decide what should happen for an attendee, a no-show, and someone with incomplete registration details. After training on a deliver process, ask the learner to identify which population should receive the message and which suppressions apply. After training on the portal, ask the learner to find the next step for 3 different student scenarios. That's where learning can actually become visible. Gamification works best when it's attached to real objectives. The game mechanics can make the experience more engaging, but the point is not the point. The point is practice. This is the second principle. Training should produce evidence of understanding. If the only evidence is that someone attended the session, the institution does not know much. Attendance is not competence. Completion is not even competence. A watched recording is not competence. Competence shows up when someone can perform the task, explain the logic, recognize risk, and know when to escalate. That connects directly to durable change by design from Ben and Sarah. The phrase durable change is useful because many Slate projects succeed at launch and still struggle later. The initial build works, the first group understands it, the excitement's real, then staff change, priorities shift, edge cases emerge, documentation ages, and the process starts to drift. Durable change requires design beyond launch. It requires adoption planning. It requires communication. It requires training. It requires feedback loops. It requires ownership. It even requires a way to keep the process aligned with actual work. This is where a lot of Slate teams can raise the bar. Instead of asking only, can we build this? They can ask, how will this become normal work? That question changes the project. If a new workflow is being built, the project plan should include training the users who move records through it. If a new portal is being launched, the plan should include staff understanding of what students see. If a new campaign process is created, the plan should include who can update content, who can change populations, who can review suppressions. If a reporting process is created, the plan should include how leadership should interpret the output. The build and the adoption plan belong together, and that's the third principle. Change is not durable until it has an owner, a routine, and a way to survive staff turnover. Written in Slate, not Stone, from Risa and Aaron, connects training to legacy decisions. This is important because a lot of knowledge transfer is not about teaching new features. It's about recovering why older things exist. Every Slate instance carries history. Some of that history is visible in names, folders, roles, reports, workflows, queries, and source formats. Some of it is invisible because the context lived in conversations. Someone made a decision during implementation. Someone created a workaround during a deadline. Someone built a report for a leader who's no longer there. Someone added a population rule to solve a temporary issue. Years later, the object remains, but the reason's hard to find. It's not unusual. It's a part of institutional life. The useful move is excavation, not blame. When teams document legacy decisions, they're not only cleaning up old objects, they are rebuilding institutional memory. That has training value. A legacy decision log can teach new staff how the instance evolved. It can explain why a process works the way it does. It can identify which decisions are still active, which are historical, and which actually need review. It can prevent new staff from repeating old mistakes or undoing something that still matters. This is where documentation becomes more than a reference shelf. It becomes a teaching tool. A good documentation system should help someone answer 5 practical questions. What is this? Why does it exist? How does it work? Who owns it? And what should I do if something changes? If the documentation cannot answer those questions, it may exist, but it's not yet useful. And that's the 4th principle. Documentation should preserve the why, not only the how. This becomes especially important in decentralized environments, which is where Emily's Imperfect Harmony session fits so well. In decentralized grad admissions, departments administrators can often carry a lot of process responsibilities. They may operate within shared institutional systems while also managing local program needs. That creates a real balancing act. Central teams need standards. Local teams need flexibility. Department administrators need support. Students need consistency. Slate administrators need processes that are governable without flattening every local difference. That's difficult work, and it's exactly where role-based knowledge transfer matters. A decentralized user does not need to know everything a central Slate administrator knows, but they need enough understanding to do their part well. They need clear channels for support. They need to know what they can change, what they should not change, where local variation is allowed, where institutional standards apply, and how to raise an issue. Training in that environment cannot be generic. It has to respect the role. A department administrator may need training on reviewing applicants, managing program-specific communication, understanding status changes, interpreting reports, and escalating technical issues. A central team may need training on listening to local needs, documenting standards, and building support structures that do not rely on constant one-off help. The phrase imperfect harmony is a useful metaphor. The goal is not every office singing the same note. The goal is coordinated difference. That's the fifth principle. Decentralized users need autonomy inside a shared operating model. If there's no autonomy, the system becomes too rigid. If there's no shared model, the system becomes inconsistent. The training program sits between those risks. So what does knowledge transfer actually mean in practice? It's more than handing someone a document. It's more than recording a Zoom, and it's more than saying, let me know if you have any questions. Knowledge transfer means the institution has moved understanding from one person into a repeatable structure. That structure usually has several parts. There's a rule-based learning path, there's documentation, there's hands-on practice, there's a test environment or some kind of safe practice space. There's a teach-back moment. There's ownership, there's a review cadence, there's a way to update the training when the build changes. The teach-back moment is the piece I want to emphasize. A teach-back is simple. After someone's been trained, ask them to explain the process back to you and complete a relevant task. Not a performance trap, as a way to see whether the transfer worked. If they can explain the purpose, identify the source data, describe the logic, perform basic maintenance, identify risk, document the next step, and teach another user the basics, the knowledge has moved. If they cannot, it's not a personal failure. It is training evidence. The gap in the explanation is the training roadmap. This is why the companion resource for this episode is the Slate Teachback rubric. I would keep it practical. Can the person explain the purpose of the process? Can they identify where the data comes from? Can they describe the major logic without needing to recite every technical detail? Can they perform a basic maintenance action? Can they identify what could go wrong? Can they document what changed? Can they teach another user the basic workflow? That rubric works because it focuses on applied understanding. A person may not be ready to rebuild the system, but they may be ready to own the process. Or they may be ready to use it correctly, but not to maintain it. Or they may understand the user experience, but not the technical dependencies. That's fine. The goal is not to pretend everyone is equally trained. The goal is to know what level of competence has actually transferred. For a mature Slate team, I would define training levels. The first level is orientation. The user understands what the process is, why it exists, and where to find help. The second level is operation. The user can perform the process correctly in normal cases. The third level is troubleshooting. The user can recognize common errors and know what to check. The fourth level is maintenance. The user can update approved parts of the process without breaking the system. The fifth level is stewardship. The user can actually evaluate whether the process still fits the institution's needs and can guide future change. Not every person needs every level. But every important process should have someone at the right level. This is where advanced Slate work often becomes fragile. One person may be at level 5 for too many processes. Everyone else may be at level 1, or maybe at 2. The office can function, but the risk is concentrated. The answer is not to make everyone an expert overnight. The answer is to choose which processes need broader understanding and build transfer intentionally. Start with the high-risk, high-use processes. Application review, event management, communications governance, portal updates, permissions management, assignment lists, source handling, reporting definitions, rules that change student-facing outcomes, workflows that move records, processes that affect sensitive data. Pick one process and build the training artifact around it. A strong training artifact should be specific enough to matter. How to use Slate? That's just too broad. How our admitted student event follow-up process works? That's better. How to update the application completion campaign safely is better. how department administrators should review and escalate applicant records is better. Specificity makes training useful. The artifact should also include the purpose. That sounds obvious, but it's often missing. Many training documents explain clicks without explaining why the clicks matter. If users understand the purpose, they can make better decisions when something looks different from the example. If they only memorize clicks, they get stuck as soon as the screen changes. The same applies to documentation. A useful Slate document should not only say, click here, then click here. It should explain what the process accomplishes, what data it depends on, what the expected results look like, what common exceptions appear, who owns the process, and when to escalate. That does not require a novel. In fact, shorter is often better. The best documentation is often a clear operating brief, a checklist, a short video, and a practice task. Different formats serve different learning needs. A checklist helps someone do the work. A short video helps someone see the work. A reference document helps someone understand the system. A practice task helps someone prove they can apply it. A teachback helps the team verify that knowledge moved. This is the kind of structure that can make training scalable without making it generic. Now, let's talk about expert blindness. Expert builders often forget how much they know. They know which objects matter, they know which field is safe, they know which query is old, they know which status name is misleading, they know which button not to click, they know why the workaround exists, they know what obvious means. New users don't know that. This is not a flaw in the new user, it's a normal gap between builder knowledge and user knowledge. Good training closes that gap deliberately. Instead of saying, this is pretty straightforward, the trainer explains what the user needs to notice. Instead of saying, just update the population, the trainer explains which population, why it exists, what it affects, and when not to change it. Instead of saying, run the report, the trainer explains what the report means and what it does not mean. That's one of the marks of a strong Slate culture. Experts can translate. They do not only build the system, they make the system legible. That's also why documentation ownership matters. Documentation becomes stale unless someone owns it. A process changes, a field is renamed, a workflow is rebuilt, a screenshot becomes outdated, a campaign is retired, a new user follows the old instructions, and of course, they get confused. The solution is not to give up on documentation. The solution is to assign maintenance. Every important training artifact should have an owner and a review date. The review does not need to be heavy, it just needs to happen. Is the process still current? Are screenshots still accurate? Are links still live? Are owners still correct? Did the training reflect the last change? Is the artifact still useful? That review cycle turns documentation from a static file into part of the operating system. And this is where all 5 sessions connect. Purdue gives us the scalable training mindset. The Parish group and Villanova show how interactive forms and gamified practice can make training active. Holy Cross and Gettysburg point towards durable change by design. Harvey Mudd and Huron remind us that we need to preserve and examine legacy decisions. Stanford shows the importance of centering decentralized administrators within a shared model. Together, they argue that training is not support work sitting outside the build. Training is part of the build. If the project changes staff behavior, the project includes training. If the project depends on a process owner, the project includes teachbacks. If the project creates a reusable object, the project includes documentation. If the project affects a decentralized user, the project includes role-based support. If the project replaces a legacy process, the project includes the story of what changed and why. This is how Slate teams move from heroic individual expertise to institutional competence. And that matters. Institutional competence. The goal is not to erase individual expertise. Slate experts are valuable. Builders, analysts, operations leads, trainers, and functional owners all bring craft to the work. The goal is to prevent the institution from depending on expertise that cannot be transferred. A forge can have a master blacksmith. It still needs apprentices, jigs, patterns, tool racks, safety practices, and shared standards. Otherwise, the craft does not scale. Slate works in the same way. So what should listeners do this week? Pick one advanced process and ask someone else to explain it. Not the person who built it, someone who uses it, owns it, supports it, or depends on it. Ask them what the process is for, ask where the data comes from, ask what logic matters, ask what they would do if something looked wrong. Ask what can be changed safely. Ask who owns the process. Ask where the documentation lives. And listen carefully. The gaps in that explanation are not embarrassing. They're useful. They show where the training needs to be clearer. They show where documentation is missing. They show where expert assumptions are hiding. They show where the next guided practice should be built. Then create one training artifact, a one-page operating brief, a 5-minute walkthrough, a practice form, a checklist, a test environment exercise, a teach-back rubric. Do not try to build the whole training academy in 1 week. Build one artifact for one process that matters. Then use it. Watch where the learner struggles, improves it, assign an owner, set a review date. That's enough to start. Because completion is not competence. A process that only works when the original builder is present is not finished. A report that leadership trusts but cannot interpret is not finished work. A campaign that only one person can update is not finished work. A workflow that staff use without understanding the statuses is not finished work. A portal that no one else can maintain is not finished work. The build is done when the institution can carry it. That's the standard. Completion is not competence. That's the takeaway for this episode. Advanced Slate work is not finished when it launches. It's finished when the right people can use it, explain it, maintain it, document, and teach it forward. The summit sessions in this episode give us a strong path. Brady's hitting the right notes shows the value of scalable user training. Katie and Tommy's This Is Not a Side Quest shows us how interactive forums and gamified practice can make training active and visible. Ben and Sarah's Durable Change by Design reminds us that adoption has to be designed, not assumed. Risa and Aaron's Written in Slate, Not Stone connects knowledge transfer to legacy decisions and institutional memory. Emily's In Perfect Harmony shows why decentralized users need support, standards, and role-based clarity. Together, they point to a practical standard. The build's not done until it can be taught. For this week, pick one advanced process and ask someone to explain it. The gaps in that explanation are your training roadmap. Then build one artifact that closes one gap. A checklist, a walkthrough, a practice form, an operating brief, a teach-back rubric. That's the forge work. Thanks for listening to the Conference Insights Engine presented by the Innovation Forge. Now go find one process that depends too much on one person and make it teachable. If you enjoyed today's episode, please grow the guild by rating and reviewing the Innovation Forge podcast or sharing it with a colleague who needs to hear about these creative crossovers in education. The best review or comment every month will get an ebook of my book, of course. Particularly great ones will also be featured on future episodes. Thank you so much for joining me in the workshop today. Remember to strike true and let's forge something extraordinary together.
is waiting for a fall. We made a ladder out of questions, question base and road grain, joins that hold the answer steady, rules that carry names, portal paths and even signals, deliver lanes in line, reader steps and source maps glowing. Every field has a why. Show the owner, show the test, show the part that breaks. Let the next hand run the query. Let them see the shade. The build is not done until it can be taught, until the room can sing it back from memory. Write the map, pass the spark, make the hidden logic walk. The build is not done until it can be taught. There is magic in the making, there is a risk in mystery. When the answer needs one person, that is fragile machinery. So we turn it into practice, screenshots, checks, and names. Office hours, guided rebuild, same rules, cleaner lanes. Have them run it, have them fix it, have them say what changed. When the lesson starts repeating, then the work can stay. The build is not done until it can be taught, until the room can sing it back from memory. Write the map, pass the spark, make the hidden logic work. The build is not done until it can be taught. One voice can start the fire, one team can keep it bright. A dashboard gets much stronger when the why is in the light. Name the grain and name the audience, name the rule and name the cost. If no one else can teach it, then the build is almost lost. Teach it back, teach it back. Run the rule and trace the track. Teach it back, teach it back. Build the ladder, climb it back. If you cannot show the join still owns a room. If you cannot name the reason leaves too soon. The build is not done until it can be taught, until the room can sing it back from memory. Write the map, pass the spark, make the hidden logic walk. The build is not done until it can be taught. The build is not done until it can be taught, until the next gen knows where every piece belongs. Leave the notes, leave the path, leave the team with more than facts. The build is not done until it can be taught. Turn the lights on in the room, let the lesson carry through. When the work can teach itself, the build belongs to you.